Hello, everybody. Liam Murphy back here, your best ball expert, to go over the first round of the NFL draft and give you reactions for every pick. Let's jump into it. Make sure you click the subscribe button to help support the channel. Best Ball Mania drafts will start soon. So, kicking things off with the Chicago Bears at the 101. They did draft Caleb Williams. This one was a no-brainer. I love it for Chicago. I think Caleb Williams is entering the best situation for a rookie quarterback that we've ever seen. And I think Caleb Williams will be the first Chicago Bears quarterback to throw for over 4,000 yards and has a really good chance to lead them to the playoffs. Their division is tough with Detroit and Green Bay there, and maybe the Vikings frisky. But, couldn't ask for a better situation. Solid defense. They got the quarterback. They got offensive weapons. They added to the O-line, and they still have some picks in the draft. Jaden Daniels goes at 2 overall to the Commanders. This is something that I connected the dots for, about a month and a half ago, where I said, I think Jaden Daniels is going to go number 2 overall because they signed Marcus Mariota as their backup. And yes, Marcus Mariota had worked with the OC of the Commanders. However, Mariota just sat behind Jalen Hurts. If you ask me, which veteran quarterback would you want behind a supposed electric rusher in Daniels? It's Mariota. So I connected those dots. It came true. And then the Patriots did what they had to do. They took Drake May. Yeah, they could have maybe traded back. But I think you get the quarterback, right? If Drake May is a hit, they can find the talent. I think it's way too hard to build up the roster and then hope you're bad enough to find the quarterback. I like this pick for the Patriots. You simply have to take the quarterback and hope. And Drake May is a pretty good quarterback to get at number 3. He just happens to be in a class with Caleb Williams. And so, yeah, like that for the Patriots. Also love the Marvin Harrison Jr. pick for the Cardinals. They have Kyler Murray. I definitely think that they should build around Kyler. I would not be trading away Kyler. Marvin Harrison Jr. could be one of the best wide receivers in football pretty soon. I think he could be that Julio Jones. I do not think this is a death blow for Trey McBride's fantasy value. I think they can both succeed with Kyler, and I'm excited about that Cardinals offense. They're pretty cheap in best ball as well. The Chargers take Joe Alt at number 5 overall. If I'm the Chargers, I probably would have taken Malik Nabers. A lot of people are talking about Malik Nabers like he could be Jamar Chase, but even faster maybe. That's a pretty tempting football player to add next to, to be catching passes from Justin Herbert. There were some rumors that the Patriots, the Vikings, teams reached out. Are you going to trade Herbert? I thought that was nonsense. You don't trade an elite quarterback like Justin Herbert. However, although I probably would have gone Nabers because the Chargers currently have no good wide receivers, I get the temptation to add Joe Alt. Joe Alt is being talked about like he's going to be a future Hall of Famer. They already have Rashawn Slater there. They could have 2 elite tackles, and that's really tempting to try to find wide receiver talent later in the draft, which not many went in the first round. So, the Joe Alt pick could definitely work for the Chargers. Malik Nabers does go number 6 overall to the Giants. There was some wondering if the Giants would take J.J. McCarthy. Would they go quarterback? This team is so talent-starved on offense. They have no more Saquon. Darius Slayton was their leading wide receiver. Darren Waller is likely retiring and maybe getting a divorce. That's aside. But Malik Nabers, I love the pick for the Giants. I think he's going to be a stud in fantasy as well. He was around a 3rd-round pick already, and I think he should remain there, right? This guy's going to get fed targets no matter who his quarterback is. J.C. Latham, the next tackle, goes to the Titans. So we have an all-offensive draft so far. The Titans, they added Calvin Ridley. They added Tony Pollard. They already had DeAndre Hopkins. part of me would be tempted to even add Rome Odunze. I really like that the Titans are trying to surround Will Levis with talent, right? Maybe Will Levis will work out, in which case you've now surrounded him with, players to succeed. Or maybe he crashes and fails. And that's okay too. If he's so bad that you pick at the top of the draft next year, you at least have pieces to assess your quarterback for the future years. And you don't want quarterbacks entering situations where your roster is so terrible you can't even assess if they're good or not. So the Titans had a terrible O-line. Them going tackle is very logical. The Falcons hit us with the surprise of the draft when they took Michael Penix Jr. as the QB4 in the draft at number 8 overall. The Falcons, of course, signed Kirk Cousins from the Vikings. And, of course, they did not tell Kirk that they were going to do this, right? Why would they? Everyone is hating on the Falcons. A lot of people like to feel they're smartest in the room. They want to hate on the Falcons because Michael Penix is kind of old. I believe he's 24, and so that's not young. And he's had some injury issues. He's had, with his leg. If he didn't, he'd probably go higher in the draft. I personally don't hate the pick at all for the Falcons. It is a surprise Penix went as QB4. JJ McCarthy was supposed to be the QB4 to many. However, if the Falcons thought Michael Penix Jr. has a much higher ceiling, I like the pick. A, Kirk Cousins has injury issues, and maybe they got bad injury reports. So, we don't know 100% if Kirk Cousins is playing this year. B, maybe Michael Penix Jr. is that good, and he gets in and he wins the job. Or maybe his ceiling is just so tempting that he could develop into a Josh Allen, a Pat Mahomes, someone in this sphere, and all these people hating on the Falcons are going to look like fools if he hits. Kirk is only signed for 2 years. The Falcons roster is pretty good overall, right? Like edge rusher was the need pick for them, and an edge rusher didn't go for another 7 picks. So I don't hate it for the Falcons. A lot of teams apparently were trying to trade up for Michael Penix. Teams like the Broncos, teams like the Raiders. So maybe the Falcons didn't enter planning to do this, but when all these other teams wanted this guy and they realized that they're not going to be bad enough to probably pick this high again, I don't hate going the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers route. Yes, Penix is older, but could start this year, could start next year. Even if they pay Kirk, who cares? If Penix is the best guy, you're not going to regret the pick. I'm totally fine getting your hopeful quarterback of the future as long as he's a hit, right? If he's a bust, he's a bust. Okay. The Bears did the smart thing and took Rome Odunze at number 9 overall. Of course, the Bears don't have many picks in the draft. I think only 4, including their 2 first-round picks. However, they have DJ Moore, who's young. They have Keenan Allen, who's old. They have Cole Kmet. Okay, he's serviceable. So I really like adding Rome for Caleb Williams. Rome is young. He's going to be able to be with Caleb for the bulk of, all of Rome's career potentially if he is a hit. And if Keenan slows down or retires next year, now you have a duo of at least DJ Moore and Rome. You need to give your quarterback weapons to make his, time entry in the NFL as easy as possible. So I love this pick for them. Rome was, thought he could go as high as number 6 overall. I think it's a great pick. The Vikings traded up 1 pick with the Jets to number 10 overall. Some wondered, why would you do this? Of course, the Jets were telling the Vikings, hey, the Broncos at 12 are trying to trade up with us. So if you want to secure McCarthy, you have to do it now. And yes, the Vikings did overpay a little bit. However, their roster is a little too good to not get their quarterback, right? Like if they did not get at least McCarthy, it's kind of a disaster for them. They lost Kirk. They have a roster that's good enough to win and maybe make the playoffs. And if you are stuck with no quarterback, that's unacceptable. So I like the overpay. I like it for the Jets as well. Who, maybe they were lying. Maybe the Broncos weren't trying to trade up, but I think it's smart. McCarthy, we'll see what his ceiling is like in the NFL, but he's entering a really good situation. You got Justin Jefferson there. You got Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. We'll see when he comes back from his injury. So, yeah, they could make some noise. The Jets went tackle at 11. I think they would have loved to get Rome for Aaron Rodgers, but their O-line, like they signed a bunch of one-year guys who have injury issues, so they simply need the O-line to protect Aaron Rodgers. Their O-line was a disaster last year, so them going tackle makes all the sense in the world. And yeah, I like the commitment to. They could have gone, like if you're Kirk Cousins, you're pissed off at 8 because you would have loved Rome. You would have loved to add another wide receiver and try to win the Super Bowl this year. The Jets could have done something like that, but they're so committed to this Aaron Rodgers era that them going quarterback would have been viewed like it would have been disastrous. Rodgers would have retired on them. It would not have worked out. The Broncos took Bo Nix at 12 overall. So if you're counting at home, that is QB6 drafted in 12 picks. I mean, that's insane. We've never seen this before. It's also awesome news if you don't need a quarterback this year in the first round because all the other talent gets pushed down to you. I like the pick for the Broncos. They have no quarterback. They traded for Zach Wilson. You got to roll the dice. We'll see how Bo Nix turns out. It's not great. He was QB6 in his own class, but at least there's hope now for Denver, a pretty talent-starved roster. The Raiders next took Brock Bowers, the tight end. And I mean, honestly, I think this is a pretty good pick for the Raiders. Yes, they did take Michael Mayer last year in the second round. And that kind of makes Michael Mayer maybe fancy Dawson Knox, where Brock Bowers is more of the Dalton Kincaid. Brock Bowers is talked about like he is the best tight end prospect since Kyle Pitts. He seems like he's electric with yard after the catch. I like adding the weapon. I think a lot of teams wanted Brock Bowers. I think the Colts would have loved to get Brock Bowers. Many teams, I think it's rumored the Rams would have maybe traded up to get him. So the Raiders stand pat. They take Brock Bowers. They add to the offense. I like adding the weapons. My lean is Aiden O'Connell will be their starting quarterback with Gardner Minshew as a high floor backup. But maybe Gardner wins the job. Maybe they still go quarterback in the job. Spencer Rattler is still out there. But yeah, overall, adding a blue chip prospect, not letting last year's draft stop you from doing that. I like it. The Saints added tackle. They needed to add to do this. Having a battle line with Derek Carr as your quarterback, a non-mobile guy, is a disaster waiting to happen. The Saints had tackles retire on them. They lost a tackle, so this was pretty much a need pick. It's supposed to be a good offensive tackle draft, so I like the pick for the Saints. The Colts took the first defensive player in the draft at 15th overall. We've never seen this before. The first time a defensive player goes 15th, and they took the edge rusher Laiatu Latu. This was not necessarily a huge position of need for the Colts, but I like it, right? Like if they thought he was clearly the best player on the board, has the highest ceiling, it's at a premium position edge rusher, do it. A lot of people thought they needed help at wide receiver, tight end. That's why Brock Bowers would have made sense for them. The next wide receiver didn't go for a long time, right? So they could have reached on someone like Brian Thomas Jr. to add to Anthony Richardson's weapons. But when in doubt, taking the best defensive player in this draft cannot be that bad of a pick. We'll see how he turns out for the Colts. The Seahawks, with their new coach from the Ravens, added Brian Murphy, the defensive tackle. This dude's a monster. I like this pick for Seattle. It makes sense that, a defensive head coach is going to add to the trenches for his first pick. The Vikings traded up to take Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner was not expected to be here. So the Vikings overpaid as far as draft capital goes for what's expected. They pretty significantly overpaid to go from 23 to 17. However, in their mind, they think they're getting a guy who could have gone in the top 10 and at number 11, and he's there at 17. So giving Brian Flores another weapon for the Vikings makes sense to me. We'll see how Dallas Turner turns out. And I think Jacksonville's pretty happy with who they got. I think, a lot of people thought corner was a big need of them. I thought wide receiver was a huge need of them. They had Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Zay Jones. Not the most inspiring room. They lost Calvin Ridley. Of course, they had Evan Engram. So them trading back and still getting their wide out, they got to be happy. The Bengals took a tackle to protect Joe Burrow. Makes sense to me. You got Joe Burrow. The dude's been injured the past couple of years. Get him some weapons on the O-line. Keep him upright. I like the pick. The Rams are a wild card. A lot of people thought they could trade up. A lot of people thought they might go Xavier Worthy. A lot of people thought they would go offense. Of course, Aaron Donald retired. They, however, went Jared Verse, edge rusher. Probably just the best player on their board. They haven't had a first-round pick for a long time. Their offense is honestly pretty good, and their defense is not. So adding to the defense makes sense to me for the Rams. The Steelers went tackle with Troy Fatinatu. Sorry for pronunciation there. I think it's a good pick. Again, this is supposed to be a good offensive tackle draft. Maybe Justin Fields is the future plan for the Steelers. Maybe he's not. Whatever the case, the Steelers O-line a couple years back was terrible. They added to it last year. They're adding to it again. They're probably trying to build an identity as a smash mouth run team, but also if Justin Fields flames out or develops, having a good O-line to keep him upright will help. The Dolphins lost a lot of talent this offseason, and they selected Chop Robinson. Adding to their defense, pretty important. They lost Christian Wilkins. They lost so many guys, so probably just the best player on their board. And, now we've seen 4 edges go and so many picks. So I like the pick if he turns out. The Eagles were terrible at cornerback last year, and they take the first corner in the draft. This is the latest we've seen the first corner ever go, pick 22. The Eagles got to be stoked that they did not need to trade up, and they still got their cornerback 1 at pick 22. I like the pick. The Eagles' offense is solid, right? Like, they've had some unfortunate injuries. Yes, they lost some guys on the O-line. Jason Kelce retired, but fixing that secondary was number one most important thing, and taking the best corner in the draft should help. The Jaguars, I love their pick here. They traded back, and they still got the guy they probably would have taken at 17 in Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver 4 in the class. He's kind of like a overlapping body type with Gabe Davis and Zay Jones. However, he's much faster. He can run a full route tree. He didn't have to do that at LSU. Chad Hall, the wide receiver coach for the Jags, is a pretty good wide receiver coach. He was with the Bills before, coached up guys like Gabe Davis. I'm expecting Brian Thomas Jr. to walk in there and be a walking big play. Trevor Lawrence, contrary to popular belief, is a good downfield thrower. He was pretty unlucky last year, him and the Calvin Ridley connection. They could have had literally 6 to 7 more touchdowns if the NFL field was like half an inch bigger. And Brian Thomas Jr. has got a great chance to walk in there, be the wide receiver 2. Christian Kirk will get the middle of the field. He gets the downfield. You got Gabe Davis taking another side of the field, or maybe Zay Jones. I like the pick for the Jags. They need the offensive weaponry, frankly, to support Trevor Lawrence. The Lions defense a couple of years ago was a total disaster. This past year, they committed to shoring up their run defense, and they were successful at that. They fixed that. Their secondary was still terrible. And so what did they do? They took the second corner in the draft, Terrion Arnold. I like the pick for them, right? Their offense, very solid. Great O-line, great weapons. Quarterback, he is who he is, but he's good enough to win. Fix the secondary, make the team have no holes. I like it for the Lions. And they traded up to do this with Dallas, which, of course, was electric when the draft was in Detroit. The Packers, they had some O-line retire on them, David Bakhtiari, I believe. And so they go tackle Jordan Morgan. Can't hate that pick. You lost an O-line. You hit on quarterback, it looks like. You hit on Jordan Love. Give him another O-line, keep him upright. You have a bunch of hodgepodge of wide receivers. Maybe some of them will separate for you. Packers, should be playoff teams again, and maybe even the best team in the NFC. The Bucs went center with Graham Barton. A lot of people thought edge rusher was their biggest need, but they did see 4 edges get drafted ahead of them. Personally, I think the Bucs are kind of this limbo team where they have Baker Mayfield. He's clearly not going to be the quarterback of the future for long. And so building up your O-line so that maybe you get a year, maybe 2 out of Baker, but eventually you're going to have to go the rookie route or maybe even a free agent. And when you do, having a good O-line to support that guy is important for that person to be successful. So them taking the best center in the draft. Center has a really high hit rate. It's not a position that's drafted a lot in the first round. So this guy could be a stud. The Cardinals were a pretty talent-starved team overall. Their defense was not good at all last year. And so they just added who they thought was probably the best player in the, left on their board in Darius Robinson. They needed to add talent. They did so. We'll see how Darius Robinson hits, but I like it from. The Bills, this was a shocking trade because the Bills traded with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs drafted Xavier Worthy with the pick. The Chiefs were at pick 32. They traded up to 28. So first, we'll talk about it from the Chiefs' perspective. I love the marriage from the Chiefs' perspective. Xavier Worthy is a player I liked in the draft. This cover 2 era of try to sit 2 safeties deep, try to stop Pat Mahomes. There's been a lot of talk about that. Maybe that's the case. The Chiefs had a very low average depth of target last year, like extremely low. They scored almost no touchdowns, 10 or more yards. A lot of their touchdowns were dink and dunk, getting close. And what did they do? They got Hollywood Brown, a burner. They got Xavier Worthy, fastest wide receiver of all time, 4.2, 140. Xavier Worthy, he's a small guy. He's 165 pounds. Some people think he's going to be a bust, a la John Ross. Some people think he's going to be a stud, a la Tank Dell, Tyreek Hill, guys like this. I think he's going to be a hit. Maybe the Chiefs felt they had to do this with the Rashee Rice uncertainty. And so I love the marriage with Pat Mahomes. You get a huge arm quarterback. You get a burner who also, he can catch the pass 5 yards and go score for you if he's so fast. So I like the pick from them. I think people love to clown on teams. It's so easy to hate on Buffalo. Oh, Buffalo traded Pat Mahomes to the last time they traded, they got Pat Mahomes. The NFL is a relationship business, right? Andy Reid and Sean McDermott, they have a relationship. They know each other. The Bills would not have made this trade if they wanted Xavier Worthy. They would not be, I wonder who Kansas City wants. Are they going to take quarterback? No, of course they are probably going to take wide receiver with the Rashee Rice uncertainty and, guys like MVS and whatnot being the top wideouts. The Chiefs clearly wanted to fix their wide receiver room, and the Bills, frankly, did not think Xavier Worthy was worth the grade for them. They flat out didn't want him, or they wanted someone else, right? Or they had like 5 guys all ranked the same. And so if the Bills were not going to take Xavier Worthy, there was nothing they could do to prevent the Chiefs from taking that guy at pick 32 if they reached them. So they took the best deal they could. It was about equivalent of a 6th-round value. They went from a 4th-round pick to a 3rd-round pick. And that's a win-win where the Bills are happy. They, and the Chiefs are happy because they secured their guy. They weren't sure probably if like the Cowboys maybe would take him. Because I think the Cowboys were an outside possibility to go wide out. Moving on to the Cowboys, they went tackle. This was a huge need position for them. They had, they're keeping their O-line solid is very important. I also thought adding a clear number 2 wide receiver beside CeeDee Lamb would be a priority for them, but I don't know. The Cowboys are acting weird. It kind of seems like they are halfway into committing to Dak, halfway. Let's just see what happens this year. And so giving him an O-line makes sense to me. The Ravens, needing help in the secondary, drafted Nate Wiggins. This guy could be good. He's a little small. It looks like he needs to get a little bit stronger, but He does seem to embody the Raven mentality in that secondary. And so I like the pick for them. The Niners made a bit of a surprising selection with Ricky Pearsall. Names I saw floated as wide receiver because Worthy was wide receiver 5. Names I saw floated as wide receiver 6 more often were guys like Adonai Mitchell, even Ladd McConkey. And then Ricky was kind of in that next group. Some thought Keon Coleman, some thought Troy Franklin. But Ricky Pearsall, apparently he's going to be a stud. CJ Stroud was, CJ Stroud, who scouted Tank Dell, was pretty pissed off that the Niners got Ricky Pearsall. I don't really know what CJ Stroud was thinking. The Texans don't draft for a while. They traded for Stephon Diggs. They probably weren't going to go wide receiver, but this adds a lot of questions here, and it's going to tie us into talking about the Bills pick because there's been a lot of rumors that the Niners pressed against the cap. They're going to trade Brandon Ayuk. They can't pay him, or maybe they'll trade Deebo Samuel. He's older, and maybe this Ricky pick is tipping their hand that, yes, they are planning to trade him, or maybe they're just planning for the future. Anyway you have it, I like getting more weapons for a Brock Purdy level quarterback. Maybe it's a guy who can help push them over the top. Steve Smith Sr. also loved Ricky. So sounds like this guy's going to be a stud. The Bills made sitting at pick 32 with the Chiefs trade. The Panthers were slotted to pick at pick 33. The Bills made a trade back, getting about they went up from like 60 picks, I think, in the 6th round to the 5th round. So that's a pretty significant movement for them. Just to go back one more pick in the draft. We'll talk about them in a second, but the Panthers did draft Xavier Legette. A lot of people, we always try to comp guys to Deebo Samuel. People talked about Xavier like he was in the Deebo Samuel mold. And frankly, the Panthers needed to add wide receiver talent in order to even evaluate what Bryce Young is, right? Like, can Bryce Young be even a good quarterback? Can he be, maybe he could be elite, right? Their team was so bad last year. It was hard to evaluate. Maybe Xavier Legette will be a bust. His career yard per out run in college, him and Brian Thomas Jr. was not great. However, he's pretty good his senior year. And I'm never going to hate on a team adding a wide receiver to evaluate their quarterback. Yes, the Panthers overpaid, and getting the 5th-year control, which you get the rookie, you get the 5th-year option when you're a first-round pick versus the 2nd-round pick. It's not worth as much anymore when the 5th year is fully guaranteed. But clearly the Panthers valued it, and the Bills valued getting the huge move up in the draft. And moving on to Buffalo, of course, they are going to be pick 33. They did not pick in the 1st round. Having pick 33 is valuable for a couple reasons this year. Number one, it gives you the full day to make any deals, right? There's going to be a lot of players still on the board that some teams are surprised are there. So it gives you all the time in the world for another team to come in and knock your socks off and overpay, in your opinion, for pick 33 if you have a couple guys that you either don't think are worth 1st-round picks, top of the 2nd, and you think everyone is kind of on a flat tier, or guys you just like later in the draft. And so it gives them time for another team to trade up with them. It also gives them time where if the 49ers are for real about trading Brandon Ayuk and or Deebo Samuel, maybe the Bills are going to take the time to make that trade with the 49ers today. And so the 49ers could trade for pick 33, and maybe the Bills get Brandon Ayuk, their wide receiver 1. If they stand pat, my expectation is the Bills would go someone like Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell, he's kind of like in that DK Metcalf mold. He does have diabetes, which does seem to be a legitimate concern for managing it at the next level. But, the dude's a physical freak. I could see them going someone like that. I could see them going someone like Ladd McConkey. I could see them taking the defensive pack, Cooper DeJean. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out. I don't think they're forced to go wide receiver, they could go someone like edge rusher, D tackle, if they think, or corner or safety, and double tap wide receiver later in the draft, something like that. If you enjoyed this more, usually I do live streams of my drafts. If you enjoyed this more, recorded type video, please let me know in the comments. Make sure you smash that subscribe button. I'm on the road to 5K. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you soon for the Best Ball Mania drafts.